I'm joined today by Amanda Knight, our Senior Design Coordinator. For our presentation today, we're going to give you a little bit of background about the National Wildlife Federation and the Early Childhood Health Outdoors program. And then we're going to dive into best practice in outdoor spaces and really just some high quality natural play environments, from some that are very low cost and affordable to those spaces that are, very high end, that have been very thoughtfully designed. And then we'll show a local case study of a site here in the Denver metro area. And then we'll conclude with some resources. But we always like to start our presentations by just having participants reflect on your favorite outdoor space or your favorite memory spending time outside as a child. It would be wonderful if we could have a couple folks unmute and share their story. You can also use the chat as well.
I'll share. My name is Betsy, and most of my childhood years were spent in Florida, but I especially remember camping with the Girl Scouts and climbing up in trees, and I had a grand time.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
We have a couple coming in the chat here as well. Stacy says, the creek out back in the woods of my house, always played splashing around and getting muddy back there. Barbara says, hiking, picnicking, and camping with my family in the Colorado outdoors. Trisha, playing by the river near my grandparents' house in Iowa.
Wonderful memories. Thank you for sharing.
Viviana also shared, my parents took us camping every summer during my childhood for vacations, including uncles, aunts, cousins. I loved every minute of it and brought great appreciation for nature.
Wonderful.
One other, my family's cabin on Silver Lake in New Hampshire.
Ah. Amanda, that's in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I'm originally from Maine, so definitely up there.
One final one that I see from Taryn, at my grandparents' house in Alabama, playing underneath a pine tree.
That's great, thank you. Well, we like to take, for many of our trainings and our professional development, we like to ground ourselves in what has shaped us and led us to where we are today. And so often that includes really positive experiences outdoors. The primary audience for our work are early childhood professionals, and I'll dive into that in just a minute. But so often when we are training and we ask this question, the next kind of step is, do you think children today have those same experiences that you had growing up? And oftentimes I get a resounding head shake, no. And the sad reality is that chickens and prisoners are guaranteed more outside time daily than children. So that's why this work and ensuring that children have daily access to nature is so critical to the program that we're going to share with you today. So as I mentioned, we are part of the National Wildlife Federation. The National Wildlife Federation is one of the oldest and largest conservation organizations across the country. It has various programs from protecting wildlife corridors, maintaining public lands, saving the LA Cougars, water protection in the East. So just really amazing, robust programs that really strive to ensure that people have a connection to their local environments and a connection to their local wildlife. And I'm thrilled that National Wildlife Federation has recognized the importance of working with our youngest learners. So our babies, our toddlers, and our preschoolers, and created a program called Early Childhood Health Outdoors that specifically targets and works with caregivers and families who have children under the age of 5. Many of you, just another caveat to National Wildlife Federation may be familiar with Ranger Rick. This is one of the ways we provide educational resources to families and teachers. So really, what is the ECHO program, Early Childhood Health Outdoors? Our vision is to ensure that every young child experiences nature daily for the health of our kids, communities, and planet. You know, many of us, when we reflect on those experiences that shaped us when we were children, involve big nature. It could be visiting a national park. It could have been exploring a forest or going canoeing. What we really strive to do is to ensure that children have daily experiences with nature in the places they access on a daily basis. So recognizing that's in licensed childcare programs. So your childcare program down the street, the standalone private childcare, your kinder cares, you know, pre-Ks in elementary schools that may have preschool programs, and then also recognizing that we are in public spaces as well. So making sure that there are high quality outdoor nature play experiences at parks. And that's a lot of what we're going to share with you today. But our primary audience is licensed childcare programs. We work with 74 programs across the state to improve their outdoor play area for children. And what does this look like? We are a team of landscape design experts and early childhood experts, and we come together with a site. They apply to work with us. When we select a site, we sit down with them and really get to know their community. What are their needs? What's working well? Who do they want to engage? And then we help them come up with a long-term vision and plan for their outdoor space. So very comprehensive landscape design support. And then we couple that with activation support. So recognizing that if you have a really high quality natural outdoor space, but teachers don't feel comfortable playing with sticks and mud and nature, you're not going to have successful activities or kids feeling comfortable using the space. So we ensure that while these sites receive these really comprehensive design plans, they also receive training and professional development. So teachers know how to engage children in nature play and know how to embrace those bugs that may come when you start bringing in natural elements. And then all of this is also to just reiterate that this is very much a community engagement process. We do not come into a community and say, here are the 10 things you need to do to fix what we think your problems are. We really work within the programs that we work with to get to know them and understand what their needs are and help them bring their vision to life. The other caveat to our approach is we are not extreme playground makeover. We do not come in overnight and do a big, you know, volunteer build day, cut a ribbon and walk away. We are really meant to be a long-term relationship with the sites. The sites that we develop do take time. It's typically a 3 to 5 year process. We really stress incremental change. And just diving in a little bit more, our landscape design work really focuses around understanding site analysis, where's the sun, where's drainage, where are the fences, where are the children accessing the space, so really getting to know the outdoor area. And then we work with that program again to come up with that long-term plan that has just these beautiful design features and activity settings that Amanda will share with you in a little bit here. But the schematic design is really meant to be that, you know, big long-term plan that incrementally will come to life over time. And that's where action planning comes in. So we work with a program to take that big 5-year plan and kind of break it down into smaller chunks. So what can be done on Monday? What could be done a month from now? What can be done 6 months from now? What are you going to do 2 years from now? And then we work to kind of cost estimate what it would take to build these spaces. And we really do try to encourage volunteer engagement, family engagement. So many of the components and activity settings that we implement are really easy for volunteer groups to come in and help build. Yes, there are some definitely pieces that you need a contractor for, but really just engaging families in a new way and inviting them into the space to help build out a beautiful natural playscape is just really powerful. And it's we've had a lot of our programs have a lot of success with having parents come out of the woodwork that have not engaged or, you know, known how to participate in their child's education experience, but by providing volunteer opportunities, they're able to have a role in their child's education, which is exciting. Again, like I mentioned, we provide professional development. So about nature play, it's very much skills-based. We provide, so some of the examples are teaching early childhood professionals how to garden with young children. We have trainings on nature play, trainings on loose parts play, just a lot of really great opportunities for teachers to learn how to get a little dirty in the outdoor space. And then we provide ongoing technical assistance. Again, we're here for our sites, even sites that are just embarking on very low barrier ways to embrace nature play. We provide a lot of great resources and materials that we'll dive into in a little bit, but just recognizing that we want to ensure our sites are successful and that these spaces are sustainable. And for many of you, you know, recognizing we're in this space and we're working with children under the age of 5 because there's so much development that happens. 90% of neural pathways are developed before the age of 5. And we want to ensure that these big words, these big, bold things that we see in children today, we can have a say in how we fix some of these through recognizing that nature has so many positive benefits. I know many of us here are here today because we understand the importance of nature, but there are, you know, as we go back to just this page of these issues that we see in children under the age of 5, as a former preschool teacher myself, I had children come into my classroom stressed, sad, malnourished, that I couldn't solve all those, but I can use nature to try and make improvements and to try and provide those holistic health benefits from increasing physical activity, reducing stress, better problem solving, more social emotional development. So, and then of course, one of our main goals for the National Wildlife Federation is increased environmental stewardship as adults. So we really want to ensure that those babies, our toddlers, our preschoolers have opportunities to engage with nature, to see a butterfly, to touch a flower, to sit in grass. We want to ensure that the spaces children access daily, so the park down the street, the licensed childcare program, embrace nature and have really high quality choices for children outside, which then kind of lends us to the, you know, the reality of when you look at a playground, this is what you see. When you Google playground, this is what you get. You get these really bold plastic play structures that, yes, look really inviting, but ultimately don't really provide a lot of developmental benefits for children, because oftentimes a child's gonna climb up the ladder, go down the slide, climb up the ladder, go down the slide. They've mastered it. They've learned that skill. Now what else are they going to do? They're going to climb outside the structure and use it in a way that might not be safe. So what we want to see, well, let me back up here before we get to the baby and the cage picture, is that how did we end up here? How did we end up with these really, you know, plastic structures? And I think so much of it stems from, we always have best of intentions. We want to get children outside. So, you know, here's one example of a historical way that we connected children to fresh air. You know, then you have these, you know, almost like gymnasium-like play structures that clearly are very scary just to look at, let alone play on. And then we have these, you know, back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, we have these, again, metal play structures that, you know, look like a lot of fun, but also carry a lot of risk where you're going to see a lot of injury. So what happens when you have all those risky environments is the pendulum swings and you end up with these really stark, bland outdoor playscapes where nature's outside the fence and what you have is a safe environment for children to play that is very low risk. So what we want to strive for is to have a balance. We know safety is important. We want to make sure we're following rules and guidelines for safety in outdoor spaces, but we also want children to have choices. We want children to be able to touch a flower and, like you can see here, roll down a hill a hill covered in grass, slide down an embankment slide, but still recognizing this is a safe space, but it's just so much more inviting for children, and there's so much more for a child to do because it's open-ended. So within these spaces, you may have your centralized play structure or gross motor material, but then there are other choices for children. There's potentially a earth play area, loose parts play, a mud kitchen, sand play, pavers for balancing, tunnels, plants, gardens. So it's not just a single play structure, but there are lots of choices for children that really embrace nature and natural elements. And going back to risk, of course, you know, we don't want to eliminate risk. There is such thing as healthy risk. We want children to be able to push their boundaries and but to feel safe doing it. So even having a boulder in your space where, you know, you see this one little girl is just so excited, she's jumping off the boulder, and then you see the little girl behind her still kind of practicing her balance and trying to figure out how to climb onto the boulder. So they're each at different levels, but they're going to be learning from each other and trying new things together. And then also thinking about these spaces are not just for gross motor. Outdoor time is really whole child development. We want to embrace you know, quiet time for children as well. So allowing children the opportunity to reflect and have a moment if they had a stressful morning or their day just isn't going well. How can we use outside time to kind of nourish the soul as well? So this little boy here, he's sitting on a tunnel. He feels like he's surrounded and hidden in a jungle, whereas the teacher can observe and see him the whole time, so he's safe. I want to pause. Are there any questions about Echo before we transition to what these spaces look like in some case studies?
If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. If not, I think you were saying earlier that it's okay for folks to unmute themselves as well if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt. Okay, well, I'm going to transition and turn it over to Amanda Knight. She is going to walk you through some examples of nature play spaces in public parks from across the country, and then we'll conclude with a case study of a site that we're working with here in the Denver metro area.
All right, thanks, Adrienne. So good morning. My name is Amanda, and I'm the designer for the Echo team. So my background is in landscape architecture. So my role on the Echo team is working with all of our different childcare centers, schools, and public parks to help them design outdoor spaces for young children. So as Adrienne just said, we're gonna jump into design for nature play, and we'll do this by walking a little bit through strategy and then go through some example spaces. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is one of our design best practice indicators, which is providing a variety of activity settings within a space. So having multiple options for children to choose from allows for a diversity of play experiences and helps keep kids engaged overall. So when we work with our sites, we typically provide a list of different types of activity settings to help them brainstorm and come up with multiple ideas for their space. And we often include settings for dramatic play and performance areas, gross motor play, quiet and reflective areas, different types of gardens to explore, loose parts play, dedicated learning or project spaces, open-ended areas, gathering areas, digging and building areas, and so on, so that there's plenty of options for kids to choose from. So this first example of a site is Kiwanis Nature Play Yard in Greensboro, North Carolina. And this project was built at a park and designed in partnership with a Parks and Rec department. So what's cool about this space is that it was kind of just a leftover area in the corner of a fairly traditional park, and they decided they wanted to pilot it as a nature play space for children of multiple ages. So it was pretty much built in-house with whatever leftover nature materials from the department, as well as a couple manufactured wooden play structures. So in the end, it only came out to around $30,000, but there were no construction documents needed, and all they really had to do was get it inspected by a certified playground safety inspector, or a CPSI, after it was built. So this project ended up being really successful, but as a pilot space, they noted observations and gathered feedback from the community, and then took what they learned so that they could replicate this model and build 3 more nature play spaces across the city in other parks. So these pictures right here are the same space, both before and after. You can see in the after picture, there's an entrance pergola, a pathway for circulation, and then a couple of the play structures. And I will mention that you don't really see much for plants in these pictures, and that's because they decided to phase in plants over the years to be a little bit more cost effective. And then this fence in the front of the picture also initially wasn't there, but they got it installed really quickly after they realized that it could really shape the boundary of the space and then help parents feel comfortable giving their children a little bit more freedom to explore safely. But as you can see, it doesn't really need to be a large space, just an engaging one. So this is the same space again, and this climbing log was something that the city had after an oak tree fell down during a thunderstorm. So even though this is a natural material, it's going in a playground, and we need to think of anything that's intended to be climbed on or played on as a piece of play equipment in terms of safety. So this log had all of its branches and hazards removed, and the sharp edges were sanded. It's anchored in the ground, and it has the fall zone safety surfacing around it as any play structure would have to meet those CPSI standards and to ensure that any child using it will be safe. So this last picture of Kiwanis Nature Play Yard is just a cute little table and chairs that were created from leftover trees as well. You can see that logs are just a great way to create some cheap and effective outdoor furniture. And you can find a lot of different inspiration images like these, both on Google and Pinterest. So this next project is pictures of the Cincinnati Nature Center in Ohio. And by contrast, this project was over $1.2 million. So quite a big difference there. And while it looks very, very natural, it was actually very intentionally designed. This space is completely enclosed at the Nature Center, and you can see one of the main features is this creek area, which recirculates filtered water. And one of the big lessons learned from this project was to provide things like a changing room so that parents can feel comfortable bringing an extra pair of clothes and really letting their kids get dirty and wet. So this is a different view of the same space. And again, everything was designed and detailed with construction documents to create a very intentional space. And in fact, this was one of the only spaces at the center where families could really get off the trail and go exploring because it was intended for that. And in fact, before the space was built, the Nature Center had really been seeing a decline in young family membership because it wasn't necessarily considered family friendly. So as a response, they created this exploration space and have been seeing a lot more engagement. This next space is the Green Play Yard at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. This project was around $175,000, and a lot of it was built in-house, but the space was made for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, and was built as a place where kids could really play hands-on. So in this picture, you can see their entrance. There's very clear signage. There's a dedicated overhead structure, so it's really easy to locate. And it includes benches where you can meet up with other families or sit and grab a snack before you go in. So really just a welcoming space. And then this is a picture of their toddler space. And it's a really simple area, but you can see many different types of ground surface materials and different textures and plants that are meant to get touched and trampled and loved by young children. There's a pathway to run around and connect all of the different settings, a small platform deck to step on, a playhouse, a vegetated archway in the back, and then a very slightly mounded hill in the grass right in the center there, because it really doesn't take much to help a toddler feel challenged while they're learning to walk up through the grass. So this photo is of one of their preschool spaces, and you can see here it's a little bit less designed and a little more informal and dynamic and changing all the time. And this specific area is called Under the Oak Tree because, well, one, it's under an oak tree, and then two, all of these forts you can see are just branches that fell from that oak tree that were sanded and prepped to be used as safe building materials. And again, just creating these really simple spaces that help keep kids engaged in building for hours. So this next project is called Buffalo Bayou Nature Play Area, and it's in Houston, Texas. So this space is just outside of the heart of the city, sitting in the shadows of skyscrapers, and was built as a part of a larger master plan. So this photo is the plan view from when it was designed. So you can see how it begins to show the pathways and how different areas are laid out. And this area was created because there was nothing in the neighborhood for young children, but the site also came with some very specific challenges. So one, it's in the floodplain, so it had to be designed to be flooded. And two, there's also around 30 feet of elevation or grade change. But even with that challenge, the designers were able to make it ADA accessible throughout the site. So as you can see by this picture, they really took advantage of the grade change by building a lot of the play settings into the hill. And you can see this embankment slide, and then next to it, all the stump steppers that climb up the hill. And then in the back, you can see a big lookout deck that pops out from the hill. And you can also see that they used a mix of wooden play structures along with those natural logs to balance on. And this picture also shows really well how close to downtown it was. So this last picture of Buffalo Bayou is to show that you can create play features that engage both kids and adults. And this one in particular is very interactive water table where you have to push things to activate the water. And it's in a sand area, so you can combine sand and water play. And then the other cool thing about this feature is that it was created by local artisans, so it was a really fun way to engage the community in the design and construction process. So once you have a cool designed nature space, it really comes down to programming and activation to bring that to life. And again, that's Adrienne's specialty. So different ways to activate the space are to train staff to feel comfortable using it and engaging children in the space, and then hosting activities and lessons and events outdoors in the space for your community. So a couple of these pictures are from our program, and the first picture is one of our childcare centers bringing their kids outdoors for reading after they built a really simple outdoor classroom space with just some picnic tables and some gravel surfacing. And then the second picture is an eco training that one of our sites hosted to get educators comfortable with gardening so that they can garden with their children. So those are most of our examples, but I'll go kind of more in depth with one of our sites through this case study of Anderson Park and their nature play yard. So this is one of our eco sites that is located at a public park in Wheat Ridge. So at this park, it was another case of leftover space in the corner. There's just some lawn and a few trees next to a parking lot. So you can see the before photos here. And this was their original design plan that we made for them. And while the design has changed a little bit since our initial plans, we still included all of the same features in the most updated plan. So you can see a looping path for circulation, an entry gathering area, a log circle, boulder scramble, stump scramble, a labyrinth, pollinator plantings and habitat space, and then a digging mining area and an outdoor classroom. So one really exciting part about this project was that the Parks and Rec Department partnered with the local elementary school, whose curriculum includes like project-based learning. So the kids could be involved with the design and construction process. So there were kids from kindergarten through 5th grade who were able to participate and engage and learn through the process of designing a nature play space, which will ultimately be used by them. So these next couple photos were taken during their site analysis field trip, where each grade walked to the park from their school and learned how to measure different aspects of the site and take inventory of what existed. And another fun part was hearing kids talk about how this was their first time to that specific park and how excited they were to be designing and how they were going to bring their families here all the time. And then this photo with all of them around the tree is how they measured out where the tree's critical root zone is and where they should avoid designing anything that would harm the tree's roots within their plans. So you can see in this picture that kids got to learn how to read and use plans and maps. And different aged students got to work on different areas of the space. So kindergartners and 1st graders worked on designing habitat for birds. 2nd and 3rd graders designed a play space based on the natural history of Wheat Ridge in Colorado. And then the 4th and 5th graders worked on designing a labyrinth and really testing out those math skills. And so by the end of the fall semester, all of the students had designs in hand, whether it was drawings, online models, or these physical models, and they had to present to the Parks and Rec Department as well as us designers so that their ideas could be incorporated into the final design. And I love to point out that this online model on this laptop shown here was designed by a 2nd grader, which is pretty impressive. So sadly with COVID, the students weren't able to come out yet to help build the nature play space, but these are some update photos from the park that the department has been able to do so far with their resources. So there's a pathway in a rocky scramble area. They put up a dry stream bed and a log and stump balancing area, and then a secondary pathway through a pollinator garden, which right now is being protected by fences while the plants are establishing. And there's still a lot of work left to do, but even with these simple changes that they've done over the past few months, just from that leftover lawn area, it's been much more active and engaging for the community. So that's it for the design portion. So I'll turn it back over to Adrienne.
All right, thank you, Amanda. I learned some new things from you today. That was fantastic. Does anybody have any specific design questions for Amanda before we transition to sharing some resources?
I have a question.
Go for it.
How do most of your sites raise the money necessary to change their areas?
Yeah, so a lot of the childcare centers and schools that we work with do a lot of fundraising and donation seeking, and they use their plans that we create for them to really market their strategy and like what they want to do with their space and get people excited about it. They also host a lot of volunteer days so that many of their settings can be built by volunteers and really you just need to buy the materials for. I know public parks, in this case, they had a lot of leftover trees in their boneyard that just needed to be touched up a bit before they could install and things like that.
One other question. All your pictures showed really good weather. What happens in inclement weather, and are the sites still usable?
Yeah, Amanda, I'll field this one. So we recommend outdoor play year round. Typically what happens, and especially in our mountain communities where snow sticks around, we recommend that they, some of your installed features or design features like a sand play area or loose parts play that may be covered in snow, supplementing that by bringing additional materials outside or having more raised platforms or decks that could be easily cleaned. When we work with a site that is, does have snow for a good portion of the year, Amanda's very intentional about designing components that are going to be easier for teachers to manage and to clean and to bring out materials. I also want to mention the site that Amanda shared about in Minnesota, the green, I think it was the Green Yards. It's the one that had the asphalt pathway. That's a site in northern Minnesota, and it was designed with the asphalt in mind because it's black, it'll melt more quickly. Those little platform decks were meant to be raised up a little bit so that they could be shoveled and used. There were some covered play features that could still be used that would not be affected by the snow. So, but so much of what I try and do is empower teachers to not be afraid to go outside in the winter. We do have to keep in mind, especially, there are existing childcare rules and regulations about appropriate temperatures. When is it too hot and when is it too cold? So helping teachers understand that just because you think it's too cold doesn't necessarily mean you can't go outside. And then I just also want to address your previous question about the funding. So the 74 sites that I mentioned that we work with here in Colorado are, they apply to work with us. And then as a part of that process, they do receive a little bit of pass-through grant funding from the National Wildlife Federation to kickstart their progress or their projects. So it's typically $5,000 to $10,000 to get started, but we know that's not enough for the entire build. So that's why we really encourage a lot of low barrier, asking for donations, talking to your neighbor who has a felled tree that could potentially be donated to your site. Really empowering our programs to understand that if you don't ask, you're not going to hear a yes. Any other questions? Well, we are moving along. I have a feeling we're going to end a little bit early today, guys. So I wanted to, so we're shifting gears here. I would say, well, Amanda and I want to share just some really great resources that we house on our website. I also want to share that I think a lot of these have come about because of COVID and trying to be really responsive to recognizing that childcare programs are being told to spend more time outside because it is there's a lower risk of infection in outdoor spaces. However, we know that a lot of childcare programs aren't equipped to spend more time outside. So we have been really trying to be proactive to create resources to help families and teachers create really simple, cost-effective ways to have engaging play outside. So first thing I just want to mention, this is our website. We have the resources, all the resources I'm going to share with you here are housed on our website on the resources tab or under the professional development tab. The first is our stewardship guidelines. These are, so we recognize that once you have a beautiful outdoor space, there's no such thing as a management or maintenance free space. There's always going to be some sort of annual upkeep, adding mulch, adding sand, sanding stumps. So you reduce splinter hazards. So this guideline really just provides some really great resources and ideas for how you can annually plan for and maintain your space. The next is just a really great book called Nature, Play, and Learning Places that has a lot of really great case studies and pictures for inspiration, information about risk in the outdoors. There's a lot of really great information in this book, so take the time. We highly encourage you to download it and to explore it. Just wanted to share another response to COVID. We have been working with the regulatory entities and the CDC and local health entities to suggest strategies for healthy outdoor play for childcare programs. So really what are the key considerations that those working with children need to keep in mind when playing outside and how to be safe in the time of COVID. So that's the one on the left. The one on the right is recommendations for individuals in more of a policy role or in a regulatory role, and sort of our understanding of what questions providers have or educators have and what still needs to be considered for safe outdoor play in COVID. I just want to share, we have our annual summit, which will be virtual this year. It's in partnership with Denver Botanic Gardens. And we have spaced it out over 2 days. We are going to have a afternoon keynote and panel discussion on Friday, October 23rd. And then the 24th, we'll have a keynote and and 2 breakout session opportunities. All of it will be recorded, so session or summit participants will be able to access all the resources that are shared. But definitely recommend, if you're interested in ECHO and want to learn more, please consider participating in our summit virtually. And then if you're interested in learning more about outdoor play and the skills necessary to engage kids outdoors, we offer annual professional development. We have quite a few offerings listed on our website right now, so please check us out. And then, as I mentioned, just really what are those really easy ways you can start making changes to your outdoor space that create and enhance outdoor play and add those natural elements. So we have, I think, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, 12 different how-to guides on our website, from how do you prepare stumps and logs for your outdoor space to how do you build a mud kitchen, sand play. So just different features and elements that you could incorporate into your outdoor space. Really easy, just like a how-to guide. What do you need to know? How many 2x4s do you need to purchase? What resources do you need? And then on the right, we have a book on our website. It's called Nature Play at Home. It's really meant to be a low barrier way to connect families to outdoor play. We have the entire booklet on our website, but we've also broken it out into a couple of different one-pagers that are really easy to digest and really easy to share with families to encourage them to think about how they might be able to make small changes in their backyard spaces. And then for those of you, we want to reiterate that the spaces that we design all meet existing rules and regulations for childcare facilities. So everything that Amanda showed you through, they were all safe spaces that met CPSI, Certified Playground Safety Inspections, or if it was in a licensed space, it meets it with the existing rules and regulations. So we created, just because so many educators are so nervous about embracing nature play because they're afraid that they can't have sticks, that they can't have rocks, that they can't have mud in their outdoor space. We created a document, called Playing by the Rules, that breaks down all the different elements and features a child care provider might want in their outdoor space. And it breaks it down as to what does child care licensing say, what does sanitation say, and then the quality rating tools, which is Colorado Shines here. What do those say, and what considerations do you need to keep in mind if you want to have a music area or a sand area or water play? So it really is just a very easy guide for providers to feel safe embracing nature play, because they can go through this and understand how they're meeting the different rules and regulations. And then we're going to do a little bit of reflection here, but I just want to just take a moment, and I think this is just a reminder that we get really excited. Sometimes we get really excited about what our goals are for our children when we play outside, whether we're an environmental educator and we're trying to teach about prairie dogs or photosynthesis or whatever that educational goal is. Those are important, but we also want to just take the time to just pause, and especially with our youngest learners, is let them take the lead and allow them the opportunity to explore nature at their own pace, and to have that moment where these children here are observing a bee. There's a bee on the ground, and they're being very safe. But as an educator, we just want to take that time to acknowledge that children need these small opportunities to engage with nature. So we're gonna try what we call Post-its are for reflection. So I want you to think back at the very beginning of your favorite outdoor space, and thinking now about what are your next steps and how are you going to embrace nature play and engage your community. So in the chat, I believe Julia is going to post a link to a Google document that if everybody could click on that link, follow that link, you're gonna come to a page that looks like this. You can click on a Post-it, double click on it, and you can type in your reflection or how you're going to embrace nature play in the following weeks at your facilities. Wow, I love these responses. These are fantastic. Rocks to climb, look for volunteer opportunities, building in free exploration, using some down trees for safe climbing. Looking for tadpoles in a creek. Climbing features using rocks. Oh, that's a great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that or I can?
Oh, I did not see what it was, so Amanda, go for it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll answer the question that just popped up in the chat. It's, have you ever used the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts to help build? And several of our echo sites have definitely utilized that because there's always Eagle Scouts looking for projects to build. And we had a group of Girl Scouts do some garden planting and building beds and installing pavers and creating like a gathering space. So a lot of our sites do seek out their local Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, for sure.
I love that one, letting nature be more of the teacher by stepping back and allowing children to explore. That's fantastic. Really great ideas, everybody. Oh, somebody's typing a dirt place, space large enough for kids to sit in and dig. Yeah, I have a personal story to share about that. We were at a nature center in Cleveland, and you could tell they just installed this beautiful nature play area that included a digging pit, but it was enclosed by these big boulders. But you could tell it wasn't big enough because there was all these, you could tell children were digging outside of the pit because they couldn't all fit inside. So, you know, as you think about adding in different features, think about how many kids are actually going to be using it at a time. And, you know, you might even physically want to have children stand in that space to make sure it's the size that you need it to be. Yeah,
Can I
really.
ask another question?
Yes.
So I worked at a school where they had a lot of like man-made classic like playground structure things, and they were like slowly starting to phase it out and like add in more like natural play spaces, like a tree that was like from the slides that you were showing, and like an area with like some rocks to play on, and they're kind of like testing it out, and none of the kids were like playing on those things because they still had the like man-made structure that they were used to. And so the school was like, well, we're not gonna like continue with this because kids aren't playing on those things. So like how do you get kids that are used to playing on like man-made structures to kind of transition and like get excited about using other things, like especially the older kids who have like that's all they've known, that's all they know how to play on?
Yeah, great question. I'll start off, but Amanda, please feel free to chime in. So that's where so much of our work, we recognize you can't just have a beautiful natural play space. You have to engage the teachers and professional development so they feel comfortable using the space and they can model it for the children. And what ends up happening typically too is your more traditional play structure, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, but the more traditional play structures typically take more maintenance on an annual basis to maintain their safety quality than it does to maintain a more natural play environment. So we have seen sites that, they have a traditional piece of play equipment that they remove. We don't, with our sites, if the traditional piece of play equipment is still working and the kids still like it and it's not leading to behavioral issues or safety issues, go for it. You can have it, but we definitely want to encourage the other pockets of play. Having that sand play area, a mud kitchen, a garden space. I would say it really just comes down, it doesn't just come down, but I would say a lot of it is how are teachers modeling or engaging children in play beyond that traditional play structure. I think even from my experience as a teacher, sometimes when we open the door and let children go play, we want children to have that the gross motor experience. We want them to run. We want them to get out their energy. And then again, I'm guilty of this too as a teacher. We think it's sometimes our break time that we can take a deep breath and we don't have to necessarily engage because we want kids to be independent. But I think what we try to reiterate is, yes, you need a balance. You need a balance of, yes, kids need their independence, but then as teachers, how are we planning for outside time, especially in the winter when play features might not be usable. Like your traditional play structure can't be used in the winter because of fall zone issues and compacted snow potentially. So Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd also say it's very age dependent. So I feel like younger children, it's more intuitive for them to just go explore and play in nature settings. But once you get into older, like school age, these kids need something a little bit more challenging. So if you're putting in nature play, but it's not really challenging to them, then it might not be super exciting or engaging. And you also have to think about, like, once you get into like the preteen age, like they need more spaces to gather and be social, or to have like some alone time and just have their like personal space. So kind of taking those things into mind when you're designing spaces in the first place.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see another one in the chat. How do you design for wear and tear on plants and features? I've seen plants, even robust native grasses, destroyed after planting. So this one kind of has two parts to it. A lot of times we'll design planting areas with protection fences around them, especially while they're establishing, or if they're plants that you want to be able to like feel and touch but not necessarily trample. Putting them in some sort of raised garden, or putting just like a post and rope fence around it so they're still accessible but not getting walked on. And then in reality, some of these plants will just need to be replaced because kids are going to go through it, but that's just a part of the process. And planning for how many plants that you're going to have to do that with is just part of something we have to think about from the beginning. Is there anything you would add to that, Adrienne?
Yeah, I would say sometimes we work with programs that might have your more traditional garden space that they don't want the children to engage in, or it's more where it's fenced off. It's adding to that beauty of the outdoor space, but it's maybe more adult managed. But then you also have, there's a space where it is safe for the kids to play and to touch and to pull and to dig. So allowing children that opportunity, but then there still might be a second space that is more reserved for the adults. We typically see that more so. We work with in-home providers, so childcare that's provided by an individual in their backyard or in their home. So that's the balance of your personal backyard space versus what do the children have access to.
And then I guess I'll add another thing is that if it's something like a grass maze or something that you're intending for them to walk through but not on, like really creating that designated circulation, like a little flagstone pathway or gravel pathway, so it's like really intuitive where you're supposed to be walking.
All right, well, thank you all so much for taking a moment to share your reflection and how you can engage your communities and start to create these beautiful natural elements that engage children outdoors, especially our youngest kids.
I have a quick question.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So the organization that I work for is contemplating putting in a designated nature play space. And we kind of have three environments in our area. We have, the typical urban playgrounds with those plastic structures and baseball fields. And then we also have native open spaces. And then we have like one specific park that really is probably our most natural area already. It's connected to a trail system. It's still small, but there is a pond there where the kids come fishing, and I put on nature camp there every year. And that's kind of the space where they're thinking about putting in the nature play area, which I guess I just find a little interesting because I think the kids kind of already have those types of spaces. I guess it's not designated, but they always have their specific climbing tree they climb on, a log that crosses the river they balance on, that kind of thing. So I guess I'm just curious on what your thoughts are about incorporating nature play into a more already natural environment.
Your question reminds me of, there's I believe it's Chippewa Nature Center in Michigan. They have a full-time nature-based preschool, and they actually have two designated playground areas. One is exactly as you're describing now. It's just like nature being nature, and the kids can do whatever they want. And then in the front, they have more of like a fenced in, more nature play area, similar to like what Amanda shared in the photos. I think it's doable. I think it's more, I'd be interested in the spacing of it, if there's a way that, Amanda didn't touch on this too much, but the spaces that we showed in the photos oftentimes were fenced in, because it was like where they could, the site would designate, this is nature play, and this is, but it's safe for families. Like families like the fence because it just helps them feel like their kids have boundaries. So I'd be interested to think about, still embracing the type of, nature that you're recognizing, but then maybe having the specific nature play area just be designated with a fence, and maybe being very intentionally like, here's the entrance area. Amanda, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, like it would go in, like fit in really well with what people are already there for, but it's not a bad idea to include like other pockets of nature play in these other parks and areas that you're talking about, because it's something simple that you can do and add to the playgrounds that are already there, but you don't necessarily have to create a whole nature play space that's separate. You can just add in features to what's already there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we are going to wrap up here, but I just wanted to, I love this photo of this little girl. Nature It does not have to be big. It does not have to be grand. We don't have to go to the mountains or the prairies every day to experience nature. It could just be very simple of a little bowl with dirt in it. And this little girl is very engaged and very excited to get her hands in the dirt. So it's just a small, intentionally planned experience, very low barrier, but this is nature play. This is what we encourage in our sites on a daily basis, is that children have the ability to have those small moments with nature. This is our contact information if you would like to reach out with any specific questions. Otherwise, I know we're ending a little bit early here, so Amanda and I are happy to stay on the line to answer any questions. So just thank you all so much for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
It does
Awesome,
look like
thank you. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
Oh, I was going to say, it does look like we had one final question pop up in the chat. Are there any current COVID recommendation for sandboxes?
Right now in licensed child care settings, educators are being told not to play in sand or not to have communal sand. It's recommended that there is no sand play right now. However, this image here, I think, is a way that some programs are getting around that, is having individual sensory experiences for children as opposed to a shared experience. But of course, it's very different, you know, if you are cohorting or you're with pods, then potentially there could be more opportunity for sand play. Amanda, what would you add?
Yeah, I've seen more back and forth about sand play with our sites. Like some of them are still utilizing sand. I think concern is around water play, because nobody has been doing that recently. But I would just say what you said.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing this conference session with us today. And for everyone that attended, we hope you learned a new strategy or tool to take away with you. And the shared files from today's session can be found in the schedule linked to this session in the next few days. And finally, thank you to all for joining us, and get up, stretch, step away from the screen, enjoy a quick self-care activity. Perhaps you could spin around like the ripples in a lake. And I'll also keep the chat going here for a little while if you have any additional questions. Thanks for attending, and enjoy the rest of your conference day.
Amanda, I had a question actually.
Yeah,
so my best friend is a landscape architect, and so I feel like pretty like I know some of the stuff. I was wondering what that program was that the second grader was designing in. Do you know, was that like a kid-friendly version of like InDesign or something along those lines?
Yeah, it was called CAD something. I don't remember, but it was like some sort of like free online program that they were teaching and using within that program.
Cool.
It was called Tinkercad.
That's awesome. I'm gonna write that down.
I love Tinkercad, and like the middle school to high school kids can really use that. We've designed solar cars with that.
Yeah, I was so impressed when the second grader just walked up with a laptop and a 3D model, like, oh, that's what I was doing in college.
Yeah, Adrienne and Amanda. I live in Battlement Mesa, and the town, well, we're not a town, we're unincorporated, but Battlement Mesa put in what they call a park, and they modeled it on kind of the Western thing. They put in a jail, and they put in a wooden store. So they have structures, but they just sit there. But the worst thing is they put in some kind of play things that are made of steel. And we get 100-degree temperatures here. You can't even touch them. let alone play on them. And so I would like to talk to you further about how some simple things might be done to make this space a little more kid friendly, and to not spend a lot of money, because it would be self-funded at this point. So, but I would like to mine your experience and see what you can add. And in the meanwhile, before I contact you, I will go back to the site and examine it again so it's fresh in my brain.
Yeah, if you're able to take some pictures and send it to us via email, we can try to make some recommendations or just see what's kind of causing the problem.
I will try to do that. I have not been uploading pictures to the computer lately, but if you could give me a phone number, I know how to text to send pictures.
Oh yeah, I'll privately message you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I just sent you my phone number.
Great. Well, thank you, Dustin and Julia. It was nice to meet both of you.
And I've got your name, but no
What was that? I sent it in that over the Zoom chat. Or did you receive that?
Well, yes, I have your name and privately, but there's no message there.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, if you send me your email, I can reach out that way and send you my phone number.
I took down both of your emails, so
okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will do that. Thanks for doing this session. It was very interesting.
Our pleasure. We love
joining.
it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Adrienne and Amanda, thank you.
Woohoo.